The bank that changed everything, and why you've never heard of it. $85 billion. That's how much the Inter-American Development Bank has loaned to Latin America and the Caribbean since 1959. And the story of how it was created is not about idealism or development, it's about Cold War desperation, American leverage, and the exact moment Washington realized it needed to buy influence in its own backyard before someone else did. On April 8, 1959, the Organization of American States drafted an agreement that would launch an institution most Americans have never heard of. But this bank would reshape the political and economic landscape of an entire hemisphere for the next 65 years. The question nobody asks is, why then? Why that year? And what were they really afraid of? The timeline matters. April 1959. Just 3 months earlier, on January 1, Fidel Castro had seized power in Cuba. American policymakers were panicking. They'd lost Cuba, a strategic island 90 miles from Florida with Russian ambitions written all over it. Eisenhower's administration understood something simple: if you don't fund Latin America's development, someone else will. But here's what makes this interesting. The Inter-American Development Bank wasn't created to help poor countries. It was created to prevent communism. The IDB's original charter stated it would contribute to the acceleration of economic and social development, flowery language. The reality was harder: throw enough development money at the region, and maybe young people won't join guerrilla movements. Maybe governments won't nationalize American assets. Maybe they'll stay aligned with Washington. The founding structure reveals everything. The United States contributed $350 million in initial capital, roughly $3.3 billion in today's money. That wasn't charity. That was an investment in geopolitical stability. The bank would be headquartered in Washington, D.C. The president, historically, would be American. Voting rights were weighted by capital contribution. Translation: the U.S. controlled the institution. The other founding members, 18 Latin American nations plus Canada, received smaller voting shares. Brazil had 3.65% of voting power. Mexico had 2.36%. Argentina had 2.36%. The countries that needed the money most had the least say in how it was distributed. That's not a coincidence. That's architecture. By 1960, the IDB had already loaned $394 million. By 1970, it had become the largest single source of development financing in the Western Hemisphere. It wasn't competing with anybody, because everybody else had been crowded out. Here's what reframes this entire story: the IDB was explicitly designed to prevent the exact thing that was already happening. In 1959, Guatemala, just 7 years earlier, had experienced the CIA-backed coup that overthrew democratically elected Jacobo Arbenz. Why? Because Arbenz had tried to redistribute unused land held by the United Fruit Company. The coup worked. Arbenz fled. Thousands died. The Cold War logic was simple: allow social reform, lose geopolitical control. So when American policymakers drafted the IDB agreement in April 1959, they weren't creating a development bank. They were creating a containment device. The theory: use loans to modernize the infrastructure that American companies would build and profit from. Use loans to strengthen conservative governments. Use loans to make development synonymous with American alignment. The smoking gun? The IDB's first major loan went to Guatemala in 1960, $2.1 million for highway construction. Guatemala had just murdered its own citizens in the name of preventing communism. And Washington's response was to finance infrastructure that would enable more American corporate investment. That's not aid. That's transaction. By 1964, the IDB had shifted focus. It began funding social projects, schools, housing, rural electrification. This wasn't generosity, this was adaptation. After the Bay of Pigs disaster in 1961 showed that military intervention wasn't reliable, Washington needed another tool. Cultural investment, economic integration, financial dependence. Those tools lasted longer and left fewer fingerprints. The real lesson isn't historical. It's systemic. The Inter-American Development Bank represents a principle that still governs global finance. Institutions designed as development tools are often instruments of geopolitical control. They're not created because the problem is urgent. They're created because the alternative, instability, realignment, loss of influence, is unacceptable to the powerful. The IDB loaned money, yes. Development happened, absolutely. But the question you have to ask about any institution is, who designed it, who controls it, and who profits? When the answer is that a superpower designs it, a superpower controls it, and a superpower's corporations profit, then development has a different meaning than the one in the brochure. That structure never changed. The IDB still operates with weighted voting. American presidents still lead it, with one exception. And Latin America still borrows with strings attached. This video is for educational purposes only. Not financial advice.